autoimmune is very, not a simple one indication fix. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview, and we'll go into one of the major factors that we commonly see trigger autoimmune issues. So we'll go into food-based products, but I'll let you know the other things that can trigger it as well. When we look at autoimmune, we have to understand that we're looking at how the body is responding to different forms of stress and the forms they come in. So it's not as simple as do this and you get better. It's a multiple factor involvement when we're going forward. So with this one, I'm trying to put in as much as possible and understand I'm probably not going to get to everything you guys are going to want. And if you have questions, just ask. But what we'll do is I'm going to start with some simple things that we need to understand. And I'm going to first start with common autoimmune diseases that people don't even know are autoimmune diseases. So when we know the common ones, then we're going to understand these are people that need help now. If they have these problems, they need help because an autoimmune never goes away. The best we can do with autoimmune is remission. So I'm going to say that again. An autoimmune never goes away. The best we can do is remission if we're coming from a physical sense. There can be divine intervention. Don't get me wrong. That can happen. I've seen it happen. But understand that if we're in a purely physical, chemical sense, as soon as you have antibodies, those antibodies do not go away. We can get to a point, though, where you think you're completely cured. It's just that you have to understand that you can go multiple years if you're in remission. The problem is still underlying there. So when we look at autoimmune, we need to understand that it's like a fire, and the coals can either be smoldering, which is remission, or you can have a raging inferno destroying tissue. But the best we'll ever do with autoimmune is get the goals so that they're simmering and not burning or destroying tissue all the time. Does that make sense? So what are the common autoimmunes that people have? And if they have these, they need to get help now to make sure that other tissues do not turn into autoimmune problems. Because once you have one autoimmune area, you are prone to attacking more and more and more. The general rule is if you have one, where's the other ones? So if you have one, other places are going to be attacked. Where are they? Try to find them so we can help you stop that area from getting worse. One of the most common ones is rheumatoid arthritis. So that's the form of arthritis where you have inflamed joints. If you have that form, that means you're prone to other forms of autoimmune. The next one that's very common is type 1 diabetes. So this used to be called adult onset. It's not that anymore. So this is the autoimmune form of diabetes. Another common one is multiple sclerosis. We're doing good so far? Lupus is another common one. Hashimoto's, that's the one where your body attacks your own thyroid. That's another autoimmune. This one that people may or may not know, but Crohn's and celiacs are both autoimmune. Graves is autoimmune. Irritable bowel disease, autoimmune. This one, most people do not know, psoriasis. That's an autoimmune. So if you have somebody who has psoriasis, they need to be on a protective lifestyle, diet intervention to make sure they don't get other issues. This is a very common one that people have that are not aware that it's actually an autoimmune. Sjogren's, ankylosing spondylitis, myasthenia gravis. This is another one you may watch and people aren't aware of, vitiligo. So that's the one where people have white spots on their body, and that's an autoimmune to the melanin pigment of their actual skin. So it actually takes it out. So you may see the ones that are very obvious are the African-American ladies where they have like white spots on there. That's an autoimmune disease. Pernicious anemia, that means you have an autoimmune where you literally destroy the cells in your stomach and you can't absorb B vitamins. Chronic fatigue syndrome, that one can go two ways. You can have that autoimmune or it can be brain-based, so we'd have to test to know. And then this one's very interesting to know as well, Raynaud syndrome, if you have secondary Raynaud's. So that's the one where your hands get really cold when you're stressed out. And they'll actually change colors. They'll go red, white, and then blue. That one is a secondary as an autoimmune. So when we think of this, how many friends or family members do we know who have RA, type 1 diabetes, or psoriasis? There are lots of people that have this that are not aware that these are autoimmune diseases. So these are the people that have to be aware that their lifestyle can literally trigger them to get a lot worse. Not a little worse, but like literally a lot worse. Or vitiligo, oh, you just have Crohn's or you just have irritable bowel. No, these are big, major issues that these people are going to have to deal with for the rest of their lives. And we see drug commercials where people are taking things that literally can kill them because they want the symptoms to go away. And they need you to understand the biological drugs when you watch on TV and they say, have you been exposed to tuberculosis or are you planning on having a vaccine? The reason that question is on there is because they're telling you they're going to destroy your immune system. That drug is literally going to interact with the interleukins or the inflammatory cascade of your body, and those biologics will literally shut down your immune system. So that's why that question is there. So when you hear that, you know what that drug is doing. It's shutting down your immune system. That makes sense? Because if your immune system is attacking your body, if we shut it down, the symptom will go away. But what's the long-term effect of your immune system not working? Now you grow cancer. Now you can die from a cold. Other things will happen. Is this making sense? All right. So then when we look at autoimmunity, we need to understand that there are stages of autoimmunity. So there's the stage where you have the autoimmunity and you have no symptoms. That's silent autoimmunity. You can have silent autoimmunity for 20, 30 years, not even be aware of it. The only way we're going to be able to know if you have autoimmunity is if we actually do blood tests, lab tests, and see if you have antibodies. So an antibody means you have your immune system has made a flag that flags your proteins or your body as being foreign. That's how you see if you have an autoimmune. That would be primary. Secondary means that now you are starting to get symptoms, but you do not have tissue destruction. So let's take like arthritis. Let's say you have antibodies to collagen. So now you have RA or rheumatoid factor, which is IgG and IgM mixed together, but we don't need to know that. Anyways, you have that rheumatoid factor marker, and now you have swelling. That means you're in stage 2. So that means you have the antibodies and you are now having symptomatology. The problem is in Western medicine, they usually don't do anything until you hit stage 3, which means tissue destruction. That means they're not going to do anything about your symptom of inflammatory. Oh, if it gets worse, we'll do something. We're just going to wait and watch. That means they're going to wait until if we're taking RA, the cartilage is completely destroyed, and now the joint is starting to have issues. Does this make sense? RA, they're a little more aggressive because they can see it, but this is very common in diseases like Hashimoto's, where they're going to wait until your thyroid is literally destroyed and then give you a different, like a Synthroid or a different thyroid supplement. But you have to understand, just because the thyroid is gone doesn't mean you don't have autoimmune anymore. You still have an immune system that isn't working correctly. So autoimmune is when your brain literally thinks your body is foreign. So take that to realization. That literally means that the system that is made to protect you thinks you're the problem. That's scary. And it can be triggered various ways. It can be triggered by innate immune system or the immune system that is attacking right away, or the adaptive immune system. So we've all heard of vaccines and vaccinations before, right? That it tries to push up the adaptive immune system. That's the immune system that takes over when the innate doesn't do everything that it needs to do. The innate immune system is the immune system that takes out stuff when you first get exposed to it. So these are the monocytes, everything but the lymphocytes. So the monocytes, the eosinophils, the basophils, all these different blood cells that are supposed to kill stuff. If that's strong enough, the adaptive doesn't need to come into work. So if your body is heightened enough, you can literally attack these viruses and bacteria before they get in. So we're looking at that. Now, what we want to understand is that there are different indicators that tell me how sick you are. If you have autoimmune, you're really sick. But then there are indicators of how long you've gone down the autoimmune pathway, because it's a gray scale. You have no antibodies, you're healthy. You have antibodies, now you're sick, but you don't have any symptoms. Then you have symptoms, and then you have tissue destruction, and then you have multiple organ systems that start getting destructed. So we don't want that. There's single systems and then multiple. The multiple ones are going to be somebody who comes positive for ANA or anti-nuclear antibodies. So it's a test. And what they do is they find out, do you have antibodies or does your immune system attack your own DNA? Isn't that crazy? So what happens is your cells will get lysed or broken if you're in a fever, bacterial infection or something like that. And you can literally make antibodies to your own DNA. So what can trigger that are multiple things. We can have multiple factors that will actually trigger all this. That is going to be a systemic issue. That's going to be like a Sjogren's or a lupus, a bigger thing that we don't want to deal with. The easier ones are when you're dealing with single joint issues, something like that. So like maybe an arthritis or Hashimoto's, that's easier, but you're going to have other things going on. So we're going to talk about the different things that tell me if we are having a big immune issue. The first one that we need to understand is tolerance. Tolerance is a word that indicates that you do not attack whatever your tolerance is to. So you can have what's called oral tolerance, which means the foods that you eat, you don't attack. You can have chemical tolerance, which means the things that you breathe or that you apply to your skin, you don't attack. And then you have self-tolerance, which means that you're not attacking your own tissue. So what we want to look at is how many of these things are tolerant, how many of these things are working correctly. So if you have, let's say, RA, and you're attacking your joint, do we have self-tolerance? No. Now, what flares it? What causes the flare? If we eat and it flares it, now we know we've lost oral tolerance and self-tolerance. What if we can't be exposed to perfumes or smells? Then we've lost chemical tolerance. Does it make sense? The more of these tolerances you lose, the worse you're doing. So we don't want to see oral where you react to food. That means you're allergic to foods. So if you're allergic to foods, you have lost oral tolerance. We don't want to see that. Plus chemical, now you're reacting to shampoos or different jellies or things like that. You don't want to see that too, because now your immune system is really ramping up. And it's attacking things that it shouldn't attack. You should not go all-out war if a mosquito bites you. You should just have a mild inflammatory response there. You shouldn't go into all-out thinking that everything's going to get bad. Does that make sense? So we don't want to see all three. If we see all three, that tells me your immune system is extremely stressed out and extremely in a state of disarray. And when we look at the brain, from the side and from the front, this frontal lobe is literally controlling 80% of your immune system. It's telling your immune system what to do. So if you ever noticed, the people who get sick are in usually two categories. The really young and the really old. Why is that? Their frontal lobe is either not developed or it's starting to not be there anymore. So your health and how long you'll live and how healthy you'll be is literally an indication of how healthy your frontal lobe is. That's literally the secret to longevity, is how healthy your frontal lobe is, determines how long you're going to live, how easily you're going to use your body, as well as can you actually think and know where you are. That literally is your life, is your frontal lobe. Example, we took care of a young man who had Down syndrome. His frontal lobe was not very well developed. So what happened with him? He got pneumonia every 3 months since he was 1. Every 3 months they ended up in the hospital with pneumonia. When we started taking care of him with adjustments and neural training, guess what we train? The adjustment trains the frontal lobe. Every time I adjust you, your frontal lobe gets stronger. That's why when we say, oh, you have a cold, you have a flu, you have something going on, please come in so we can strengthen your immune system. That's what the adjustment does. It literally strengthens the frontal lobe so that you'll start reacting correctly. Then when we look at the frontal lobe on the right and the right side of the brain, its job on the front is to slow down your immune system, and the left side is to speed it up. So have you ever noticed that when you are sick, your hands are really cold and you're clammy? That's because your immune system being turned on is sympathetic, is you going into fight or flight. To the point where it's really fun. I started doing this the last year to see what happened. You can literally see which side of your immune system is on or off based on taking a temperature of your ear. So if you want to know if you're healing, if your right ear is hotter than your left, you're in a healing state. If your left ear is hotter than your right, that means your immune system is attacking something and there's still a problem. And you'll see it cycle. So when you're sleeping, you're going to be more right brain, because when you're sleeping, your immune system actually has to calm down. So you ever notice that you have a fever, you're like fighting it, you can't sleep at all? That's because your immune system is spiked and you're in left brain and you're in sympathetics, you're in fight or flight because you're fighting off bacteria or viruses. And then as soon as that fever breaks, you've killed all the bacteria off and your body's happy, you'll flip to right brain and then you'll fall asleep. So literally look at your temperatures and you'll know where you are. Right ear, okay, I'm doing good. Left ear's up, oh, I'm fighting off something. Got to boost up that immune system. Make sense? So that's going to show us what's going on. But we need to understand that for you to heal and not attack too much, your right brain needs to be able to shut the immune system down. When we see people with autoimmune, the right brain is always weak. No questions. I always find it weak, and the frontal lobe is fatigued 90% of the time. Extremely fatigued. So what are things that can cause this? Well, what are stressors that can cause you to go into fight or flight? Emotional stress, blood from here into brainstem. Frontal lobe gets weak. Chemical stress, exposed to bad airs, benzene rings, all these other things. Blood from here, brainstem. Get sick. Physical stress, same thing. When we look at these, we need to understand there are certain things that can really prime us to autoimmune. The number one thing that we don't want to have happen that can prime us, though, is head injuries. Because it will affect that frontal lobe the majority of the time, pull you into fight or flight, and it also, based on EEG work, will flip your brain to become left brain dominant. So now you've weakened the right side, so you can't calm it down. Isn't that crazy? And that's why we'll see head injuries, stress, and then all of a sudden autoimmune shows up. MS, ALS, psoriasis, whatever, Hashimoto's, different things will show up. And what's going to show up is based on your genetic predisposition and the environmental factors that are going to trigger you. So I've given you a broad overview, I'm going to go into food right now because it's the easiest one that you can control. But you need to understand that there are different systems that have to be intact. And if they're intact, you won't get this problem. The number one system that you have to have intact to not have, I say you won't get it, but 90% of the time you won't get it, is your gut and your digestion. If you have leaky gut, you are setting up to get autoimmune. If you have leaky brain, you are setting up to get autoimmune. And I'll explain that one to you. And if you have leaky lungs, you are setting up for autoimmune.
Define leaky.
Leaky what?
Leaky gut, leaking brains. Define that. What do you mean by that?
So find it. We actually do.
Define it.
Oh, define it. Define it. So the question was define leaky gut, define leaky brain, define leaky lung. So what happens is these are membrane areas where your body comes in contact with the world. So you eat foods, and if your body's working correctly, your stomach should be really acidic and it should kill everything, including bacteria and viruses and parasites. What is the nerve that has to be working correctly to make your body acidic? Any ideas? Vagus nerve. That's right. We're learning things. I'm going places. So if that vagus nerve is working, we're healthy because our stomach will be acidic and will kill everything off. If your vagus nerve isn't working, then the parasites and the bacteria and the molds and funguses, all that stuff can start living. So if you're like, well, I have candida gut, that means your vagus nerve isn't working. I have parasites, means the vagus nerve isn't working. I have different bacterial things growing. Vagus nerve isn't working correctly. Now, take that with a grain of salt because you can get bombarded with like things like E. coli and salmonella, like huge things that can get passed. But in the general sense, that's what needs to happen is if you're acidic enough, they can't get by. Then what happens is you have your gut lining. And you got food coming in here, and you got blood out here. Now, what's supposed to happen is when you eat, the food gets physically broken down, then the stomach acid is really high, and it breaks down all the proteins. And then the gallbladder pushes out bile and breaks down all the fat. And the pancreas pushes out enzymes and breaks down all the carbohydrates. So once you get to here, you're supposed to only have little tiny proteins that can literally go through the gut lining. If you do not have enough stomach acid and the carbohydrates and the proteins and the fats, specifically protein and carbohydrate though, are not broken down, then you'll have big chemical chains, basically protein chains, that are big enough that your body will see that as a virus or bacteria. So if they're broken down into simple amino acids, your body will not react to it. If they are complex, your body will think it's a bacteria or virus. So what leaky gut is when you have chronic inflammation, there's literally holes where these big pieces can go through, and now your body will attack it and say, this protein is bad. And it will make an antibody to it. And then every time you eat that food, you attack it. And now you have a food allergy. Now, that's the majority of the time how it works. It can come another way, though, but that's the majority of the time how it works. It can come from chemical. So that's how it works on food. How will it work on lungs, though? So lungs, your lung barrier, we'll make this. That's simple. It gets a little more complex because there's cells in here that sample all the food and they tell your immune system how crazy it's good or bad, and then it tells you how to react and so forth. But understand that when you eat food, there are cells that sample all the food that you eat in your mouth. Let's say you have celiacs, where you can't eat gluten at all. There are literally cells in your mouth that if you eat gluten and don't even swallow it, will literally cause degradation in your gut and destroy the lining of your gut if you're just exposed to gluten. That's how reactive your body will become, because it will literally think it's a protein that is toxic to it. So in your lungs, the same thing happens. There's a lung barrier. When you breathe in things, you should be able to get rid of them and everything's okay. The main thing that triggers this is either benzene rings, which is car exhaust, or mold. So if you have mold spores and you become reactive, then literally every time you're exposed to that mold, your body will start turning on an inflammatory response, and it can literally trigger your autoimmune. So what you'll hear is that autoimmune can get either better or worse with bacterial or viral infections. That says your immune system can push up or push down based on that. But food and chemicals can trigger it as well, and they'll always push it up. So let's say you have rheumatoid arthritis and you have a sensitivity to gluten. That means when you eat gluten, your body actually attacks it because it believes it is bad. That means you eat gluten, your body flares, the inflammation turns on, which means you turn on an inflammatory cycle, all your interleukins turn on, your white blood cells spike, all that stuff happens, and you'll actually attack your joints just by eating gluten. Or let's say, we'll have people say, I cannot be exposed to certain perfumes because it will flare my MS. They're not lying. It's literally the perfume, the chemical tolerance will actually flare them, turn on their immune system, and attack their own brain. So leaky gut is holes that are formed because the immune system is overreactive. Leaky lung is holes are formed because the immune system is overreactive. And leaky brain, this is where it gets really crazy, this same reaction that happens in the gut when you're exposed to gluten will actually happen in the brain. There's actually cell channels that will open up and allow all the proteins to come in and out. The body set it up so that it can allow the immune system to go in and kill anything that's in the brain. But every time you're exposed to gluten, it'll do the same thing if you have celiacs. So if you have leaky brain, we'll actually find antibodies to the blood-brain barrier, and we can actually test for them in the blood. And if you have those blood-brain barrier antibodies, that means every single time that you get flared up, the body actually attacks that. So what do we need to do to help you with this? There are certain protocols that we can actually do depending on what we find is going on. And to clarify what you have, we do need to do blood tests. So we do blood antibody tests. We do it through a specific lab called Cyrex. We don't send you a LabCorp. We send it to specific blood draw centers. And we actually do the tests to see, are you reacting to food? Are you reacting to chemicals? Are you reacting to viruses? Are you reacting to bacteria? And before we even go there, do you have an antibody? So we do antibodies first. We'll test the most common ones. And then we test to see what you have antibodies that react to. And then there are, for Hashimoto's and arthritis, there are cross-reactive foods that they know of that will literally cause the issues. We look up the journal, figure out what the foods are, and we tell you don't eat this or it'll make your arthritis worse. Don't eat this or it'll destroy your thyroid. Real simple. So we know this because they've done the testing. That's how we look at it, is we test, find the antibodies, figure out what's triggering you, then help you learn how to actually stop it. But what you have to understand is, when I went over this in the beginning, who are your friends that have arthritis, that have psoriasis, that have bowel issues, and they just think it's just a common disease, and they don't know it's arthritis. They don't know it's a autoimmune. These are the people I need you to talk to, because I just saw a psoriatic arthritis lady who said, oh, I just have arthritis, came in. She came in for neck pain. Okay. Well, you got psoriasis, so then we know you're going to probably have arthritis, because 60% of everybody who has psoriasis has psoriatic arthritis. They'll break it down. Then she's going along through care, and she's like, I just don't understand what's going on. You just took my blood pressure for a re-exam. My blood pressure is always 120/80, and now it's 80/50. What's going on? I'm suspecting we have an autoimmune that has now started to attack her adrenals. So now I'm suspecting that she may have Addison's disease, and that's why her blood pressure is so low. All because she didn't understand that psoriasis is an autoimmune, and you need to stop that problem now. Arthritis is an autoimmune, and you need to do preventative immune issues now, or it will turn into something else. That's the scary part, is people don't know that. These are commonly occurring things. They go, oh, I just have Crohn's. Yeah, that can literally turn into everything else gets bad. Oh, I just have diabetes. Everybody has it. No, that literally can turn into everything else getting bad. Oh, I just have vitiligo, or I just have Raynaud's, or I just have, and these are commonly occurring things that people don't know are really, really bad that will turn into something else. So we need to help them modulate their immune system. How do we do that? Stabilize the frontal lobe, adjust them and train them. We also will give them cheap and effective nutraceuticals that can literally help manage these issues. What is the number one deficiency that I see in here?
Vitamin D.
Vitamin D. It's the cheapest thing I sell. Literally, that alone can modulate the immune system. What's the other issue that we commonly see? These people are not eating the right diet. And I didn't even get into this, but if you eat things with food dyes and salts, your body can literally attack it because it can change the structure of the protein, and it will think it's a protein that is bad for you. And now you become allergic to more and more and more and more things. So if you can't eat more and more things, that means you have a severe tolerance issue. That means you're attacking more and more things because your immune system is in chaos. So these are the people we need to help, because once we get to a point where this lady has literally arthritis of the neck, and it just started with psoriasis, and now she's having adrenal fatigue or B vitamin issues, maybe pernicious anemia, and we're watching this progress, it just gets worse. It just compounds. And we need to help get her into a state where she can be in remission. And I'm going to tell you, the tests that we offer are very affordable, the blood tests, because if you run a ANA antibody test and stuff, it runs a couple $100, and we can literally test 20 different common autoimmunes for $500 instead of one thing at a time. You get this stuff done at the hospital, it's extremely expensive. It runs in the tens of thousands. The other thing that you need to do, if you have a friend or family member, and I know I've gone over, but the other thing that we need to do, Riley, is that timed out?
Yeah, it's almost.
Okay. The other thing we need to do is, and this is the only place I know that does this, the lab is called Cyrex. You need to test the proteins of the food, both cooked and uncooked. Everybody tests uncooked, and you're going to have literally 1 out of every 10 foods is reactive uncooked. But if you test it cooked, all the problems will actually show up, because when you cook protein, it unravels it and it changes the structure, and then your body will react to it. So if you test somebody for, let's say, raw egg, 99% of people are not going to react. But you get cooked egg, and now you get 70-80% of people reacting. So you have to actually know what you're dealing with. And so if you had a test that's done before and it's only raw, it's not really giving you good data. You need the cooked version as well. So I'm telling you this because think of your friends who have those simple autoimmune and they don't even know it's autoimmune. They need to get help now before it turns into multiple issues, before it goes from neck pain to now they have a thyroid issue or a bowel issue that keeps getting worse and worse and worse. If they're like, well, I can't eat this foods, they're telling you they have an autoimmune. I can't be exposed to these chemicals. They're telling you they have a chemical tolerance that will turn into an autoimmune. They're telling you they need help. Now you know. We have somewhere where we can literally help them with autoimmune, help them be able to manage it. Because I'm telling you right now, if they go to the Western medical model, they'll say it's autoimmune, but then all they can get given is steroids usually or monoclonal antibodies. That's the treatment. Nobody goes after the stress. Nobody goes after the management. And usually when people come in, they have spent tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars and they don't know what to do and they're told they're crazy. And they're really resistant because everything has failed. And they don't even know that there's literally an answer for them. So these are the people I want you to think of when you hear somebody, well, I can't eat that food because I react to it. Autoimmune. That's what they're telling you. I can't be around this chemical because I react to it, autoimmune. Or they tell you one of the autoimmunes I told you. Those are the ones I want you to talk to and say, I know you have something going on here. Maybe you should go get tested to see how bad things really are. And then there are simple things you can take like vitamin D, vitamin A, that can help you modulate your immune system. So think of that friend or family member, think of that person and literally change their life, because we don't want them to end up like that lady I'm talking about. Well, now we're dealing with severe issues where we're dealing with multiple systems starting to shut down. I want to thank you guys for being here. Take a chance and change somebody's life.